Clint, you graduated from Washburn High School in January of 1939. You enlisted at Fort Snelling in September of 42 in the Aviation Cadet Program. That sounds familiar. You were called up in March of 43. You were told to come down to the Federal Building on Washington Avenue with a suitcase, where he was promptly assembled, went across the street to the Milwaukee Road Depot, got on a train, and then proceeded south, stopping in Des Moines to pick up a bunch of other aviation cadet guys, stopped in Kansas City to pick up another bunch of aviation guys, ended up in San Antonio. Basic training was at Kelly Field. The note I made is that he had 3 buddies with him that went in from induction all the way down through basic. He then moved over to Ellington Field, which is now the headquarters for NASA outside of Houston. Went through Navigator and ground school. Then went to advanced navigation at San Marcos, Texas, near New Braunfels. And I'm going to tell a story that Clint can elaborate on. But when they had a weekend and they needed to do something, they went to the funeral home in San Marcos, got a limousine so that they could pack a bunch of guys into it, and went to some of the great German restaurants in New Braunfels. So the enterprising cadets we had at that time. And on Sundays they went to a golf course and played some golf. When they finished at San Marcos in December of 43, he got his commission and was coming home. And many of you people in the room remember a fellow by the name of Norm Grant? Remember Norm Grant? He and Norm Grant were coming home together. I think there was a wedding or something that was going on. But before Clint got on the train to come home, he was then shunted over to Roswell, New Mexico for Bombardier School, which he completed in February of 44. Then went to Clovis, New Mexico for his crew assignment. And then the crew came up to Great Bend, Bond, I wasn't sure what that was, in Kansas, did their B-29 training and B-17. I think that was 4-engine. Then to Kearney, Nebraska for overseas staging. And then he kind of followed the route that was mentioned earlier to Mather Field, where they then got on a C-54 and ended up going Hawaii, Johnson, Kwajalein, Guam, and then into Saipan as a part of the 498th Bomb Group, 473rd Squadron. So we had 2 guys that were in the same place, and you guys had never met each other till this experiment, right? St. Paul, Minneapolis is an ocean apart. Clint, you had your first mission in October of 44. Can you talk about some of your other missions? You did a total of 30 missions, and talk about some of the memorable missions that you had.
Okay, thanks, Don. Some of my remarks are going to be very similar to what has been said tonight. In October of 44, we got to Saipan. And if you heard Don, you said C-54. The squadrons in the 73rd Wing, and I think it was true with the other wings out there later, we had 20 crews, but we only had 10 airplanes. Nobody has ever told me, was that because we're going to fly such long missions, or just because they weren't making enough planes? The first B-29 flight bombing Tokyo was November 24th, where 10 crews took the airplanes. We were the one crew that sat out. On November 27th, 3 days later, was my turn. And those missions were daylight, high level, 27 to 29,000 feet. And first off, for those that might not know, the B-29 was pressurized cabins, just like an airliner is now. And so we were able to go in there without those heavy sheepskins. If you see a picture of a B-17 crew or a 24 crew, the gunners are out in the open window, just freezing. Between the November 27th flight and I'm going to go up to February 25th, Curtis LeMay was involved in the output, but not right out in the open. Tells about he changed the operation, which he did. But my personal experience now, November 25th was a daytime mission over Tokyo, and it happened to be my birthday. It's in my log that way. On February 28th, my crew was sent on a weather strike. We had no Doppler radar out there for weather, so they would send a B-29 crew every 8 hours on the day before a scheduled mission to check the weather, the wind conditions, the cloud conditions, and that. You took off from Saipan, you crossed over the Japanese homeland islands, but they did give you 3 2,000-pound bombs just to pick out a little target. Not a big city, don't get near the Ak or where there might be fighters. And got 3 bombs, I guess almost for fun. Go on north to the Japanese Sea and then head west to left, recording the wind, the cloud cover, and so forth. When you headed south, your mission was over almost. On the 28th, on the mission I was on, we headed south. We happened to have the squadron navigator with us that made 3 navigators. And we finally realized we were lost. With the section, you'd shoot the sun and figure your course from the position of the sun to the earth. We had charts to do that. And it was at about 6 hours we knew we were as far south as we better turn or find something. We finally, without a Mayday message, and thank you to the Navy and a fleet that was heading for Iwo Jima. Iwo Jima was under attack, and this fleet was there. They gave us a heading to Guam. That was our destination, to report our weather information. And when we got on the ground, very easy to figure out that we flew a long time. Believe it or not, we were 478 west of Guam, still heading south. We knew we couldn't reach Australia or the Philippines. We finished our duty there and went back to Saipan. On March the 8th, they didn't kick us out because they gave us the job to escort about 80 fighters from Saipan to Iwo Jima, and that was referred to by the author of the book. He only mentioned P-51s. I think they found these planes all over. There were P-47s, P-51s, P-38s, and even 4 twin-engine night fighters in that group. Now that was March the 8th. That was a morning flight. And here's where our friend Curtis LeMay really got into it. March the 9th, first schedule, night incendiary low-level missions on Tokyo. The altitude was going to be 4,500 feet, 500 feet, and 5,500 feet. That was the break. Individual all the way, and of course we got into Tokyo about 2 in the morning on our first mission. On the 9th, we lost an engine about an hour and a half out of Saipan, salvaged our bombs and went back and landed. But on the 11th, 2 days later, we were all scheduled again. And we completed just 3/4 of that mission, I guess. Over Tokyo, we lost one engine, number 4. We headed home. 45 minutes later, we lost number 3. 2 days later, on the March the 9th, they had declared Iwo Jima open for emergency landings. Had that been a day ahead of that, you were allowed to bail out or ditch. Out near Iwo, which was a good place. A lot of Navy people at that time there with the invasion. We landed on Iwo. I was 24 years old, and they keep talking about young Marines. I'll never forget those young Marines coming through the volcanic dust that they talk about. They were filthy. They were hungry. They took what food we had left in the planes, and they thought they had the world by the butt. About 6 hours later, they come in with a C-47 and picked up the crew. Later, they repaired the airplane and got it back to Saipan. Now, they referred to fighter escort. Those fighters we took to Iwo on March the 8th. I don't know what they were involved in totally, but it was April 12th before we had a fighter escorted bombing raid over Tokyo. They started, they used the B-29 at accelerated speeds to fly with the fighters, which had a faster cruising speed than we did. And as we approached Japan, the plan was make the left circle, and which we did. We looked overhead, and here comes the fighters. They circled over us. They had a real good mission, knocked down about 80 that I had heard about of Japanese planes. That was the only fighter escort mission that I had. And at that time, these were the new plans under Curtis LeMay, low-level night, and daytime was brought down to 15 to 17,000 feet. At the beginning of his, I look at night raids as the real beginning of his planning that was out in the open. Because somebody said, what are you going to do? Bring those planes down to 5,000 feet? You lose all the planes, all the planes. And his comment was, so that was just going to be too bad. My 30th mission was May 17th. I was on the island until June 10th. Took a troop ship that come out of the South Pacific with some of the Merrill Marauders.
Clint, did you have any encounters with jet stream?
Yeah, the jet stream is up around the 30,000 feet. It's usually, if you hit it right, it'll be about 200, 210 miles per hour. Quite a tailwind. Most of our missions were from the northwest. You took a southeast head, so you had a tailwind. So you were doing between 450, 460 miles an hour over the ground. So they thought they would experiment. If we went southeast of Tokyo, turned into the jet stream, our speed was 57 miles an hour. But it was I guess it was a good thing, most of the missions.